I want to head on over into fiction land and pay off what I mentioned at the beginning of the show, a guy I think you'll find very exciting if you read his novels. So let's go into a little bit of writer land and talk about our opportunity to go into booktube and discuss what we like to discuss, or I like to discuss on a Wednesday, Wordsmith Wednesday, with a very well-known writer.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, good stuff from the outer limits. Gets me feeling nice, and I get to feel good because I get to share a guy I like a lot. Nice man. He is originally from Canada, and you're familiar with his stuff. If you know movies, you're familiar with his character called Rambo. That's right. David Morrell, originally from Canada, created one of the American movie industry's biggest icons in Rambo, a Canadian man. And he is one of the most popular and most successful authors who's had his stuff turned into movies of the past probably 40 years, thanks to the work of Sylvester Stallone and some great actors. We've got David Morrell's creation of Rambo and a lot more great stuff. Now, as you'll see here, Fantastic Fiction offers this. And I've met David Morrell a number of times, had some great conversations with him. He's a fairly conservative guy politically, like pretty much in favor of free markets, that sort of thing. I met him through F. Paul Wilson and Tom Monteleone. And, you know, Paul and Tom are both libertarians. David isn't exactly a libertarian like I am, but, you know, we have a lot of great conversations that I've had with him at various conventions and things like that. Really nice, very nice man, and incredibly creative. If you read some of his short stories, there's one called The Dripping that is just remarkable, and you'll find a lot of David Morrell's short stories in horror collections. So I actually knew David Morrell because of his short stories. I didn't know that he had created Rambo when I was an admirer of David Morrell back in my teen years reading his short stories. But I later found out, like, oh, wow, he created Rambo? Like, yeah, he did. So it was First Blood, of course. And so here's a little bit of bio background on him. And I met him after I left The Outer Limits in 1996. I think, and before I went to work at Star Trek in 1998. But here he is. He was born in 1943. David Morrell is one of America's most popular and acclaimed storytellers. With over 18 million copies of his books in print, his thrillers have been translated into 22 languages and turned into record-breaking films, as well as top-rated TV miniseries. A former professor of American literature at the University of Iowa, David Morrell now lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And what a cool place Santa Fe is. That is really cool. I saw a dust storm outside of Santa Fe one time. It was wild. Wow. It was really that red stuff coming up and then everything getting dark. It was crazy. It was really intense. Santa Fe is a cool spot. So here you'll see the First Blood series began in 1972. And just like you said, you know, coming out of the Vietnam era, really infused and informed that First Blood novel. And then we've got Rambo and Rambo 3. And they're all terrific stories. Just great stuff. And so there you'll see First Blood with its new cover. And one of the older covers there. We'll show you the hardcover from way back. There you go. It's pretty good stuff. That's over at Amazon, one of the used sellers there. Okay, so First Blood is a great, great novel, and you really get to understand the character in that. And it's a little bit different. He doesn't have as much success. That's all I'm going to say. He doesn't have as much success in the book as he does in the movie. That's all I'll say. Now, there's another one. You might have seen the film Brotherhood of the Rose. That was turned into a movie before First Blood, I believe. And there it is from way back. Some great stuff coming out of post-World War II rumors and legends and myths and things like that. But I want to show you a couple other ones that I think you might like. And of course, I want to mention the Immortalis series. That's a trilogy as well. So any one of these, if you want to read them, Fraternity of the Stone and League of Night and Fog, that is a particularly great one. If you like spy thrillers, that's a great trilogy. We used to sell that all the time as a unit. Like if a customer came in and they were looking for a really good spy trilogy at the bookstore where I worked, I was like, oh, here, we've packaged these together for you all at once. And then they come in later like, wow, you made great choices. Like, oh, thanks, man, that's great. Now, the Kavanaugh series, The Protector, The Naked Edge, The Attitude Adjuster, those are more recent. So you can see League of Night and Fog ended in 1987, okay? Then you've got the Kavanaugh series, all of a sudden 2003 and 2010, 2014. And then Fred Belanger, which these are sort of psychological thrillers, Creepers and Scavenger. I think maybe inspired by the popularity of things like Silence of the Lambs, but I think he had already been thinking about these ideas for quite a while. Then he went for it. But what I want to show you is down here. The Thomas De Quincey mysteries, okay? Now, he has 3 of these, and this is the first one, Murder as a Fine Art. And you might have seen, these sorts of covers. I mentioned The Alienist before, the idea of being alienated from oneself. Caleb Carr's great novel, The Alienist, happening in turn of the century, previous century, New York, Manhattan, as a sort of Holmesian setting, but with a lot of mentions of psychoanalysis as it was first starting, and the idea of being so angry you are beside yourself with anger, you're alienated from yourself. What I want to do to recommend this, though, and this is why I want to do this segment tonight, everybody, because on Wordsmith Wednesday, I want to recommend to you that if you want to pick up something by David Morrell, you can get anything, including collections of his short stories. But if you want to travel to a different place and really learn about London around 1811, 1810, 20, 30, 40, and I saw interviews with him, he walked the streets of London so much that he could have walked it with his eyes closed and known where he was going. And he studied maps of that area, the Whitechapel area and all that area. And what's really neat is this is the first book of the Thomas De Quincey mystery series. Now, you might think, oh, Thomas De Quincey, is he like a Sherlock Holmes sort of character? Nah, not quite. And it's not just him. It's also about his daughter. The story is really about the father and the daughter, a father who is physically damaged. It's absolutely fascinating. He's physically damaged, and he constantly takes this drug, and otherwise he's just going to be in so much pain that he's not going to be able to function. And he walks all the time. He's constantly walking as part of a way to keep himself going. It's an absolutely fascinating character, and Morrell did the research into this particular stuff that this guy had to take. This guy Thomas De Quincey has to take. It's an amazing thing, and it's based on a real person, which is absolutely crazy too. But if you're at all familiar with something called the Bedford Highway Murders, I didn't know that they were real. I picked up the book. I thought, wow, this is a cool book. I want to check this out. This is going to be great, right? So I wanted to look at it because I thought, wow, this is really, really going to be cool. Well, let me give you the overview here from Amazon. As they say here, a brilliant historical mystery series begins in gaslit Victorian London. Writer Thomas De Quincey must become a detective to clear his own name. Thomas De Quincey, infamous for his memoir Confessions of an English Opium Eater, is the major suspect in a series of ferocious mass murders identical to ones that terrorized London 43 years earlier. So those are the 1811 Bedford Highway murders. Okay, and what happens, I'll just tell you the opening of the story, it's around 1851. And De Quincey is a writer. He's written this nonfiction thing, and they sort of suspect that maybe he was involved with these murders. And in order to clear his name, he gets involved with the investigation. And he takes this opium concoction that he has to take in order to stop this pain, and he keeps himself going. And his daughter keeps him going by making sure that he's sort of regulated. It's an amazing duo. So you'll see here, the blueprint for the killings seems to be De Quincey's essay on murder considered as one of the fine arts. And it's a very interesting thing because this is a real thing. This is a real publication, and it's beautifully written, describing how a murderer might look at what he or she is doing as art and put it into practice, making sure that he does it better this time. So it's sort of like a psychoanalysis of a mass murderer and how this person might want to keep doing it. Fascinating. So as you see here, it's not the Bedford Highway, it's the Ratcliffe Highway murders. In Murder as a Fine Art, David Morrell plucks De Quincey, Victorian London, and the Ratcliffe Highway murders straight out of history. Fog-bound streets become a battleground between a literary star and a brilliant murderer whose lives are linked by secrets long buried but never forgotten. And what really I want to do is I want to show you very briefly what the writing is like here. Because if you're familiar with David Morrell, he's a very dexterous writer. So depending upon what he wants to do, David Morrell will exercise his writing in different ways, right? So if he's writing a Victorian setting and it's 30 years before Holmes, but he encompasses this beautiful Victorian language. He knows the city incredibly well. So you're going to learn all about 1851 London. I mean, seriously, there's tons of maps and all sorts of stuff. It's great. But in addition to that, you're going to learn about the British Empire. And this book, Murder as a Fine Art, was one of the first books of fiction that I read many years ago, before I read a lot of nonfiction stuff about the British Empire, the British East India Company and the Limehouse and all the different things that they were doing, and what the British Empire was doing in China to get people addicted to the opium trade and then work the opium trade back into England and make it profitable in London out of the Limehouse region along the Thames. It is absolutely fascinating. He's 100% spot on what the British Empire was doing, and it weaves into this story, and that's all I'm going to tell you. If you want to see a really cool way to absorb British history, a really dark trace of British history, which goes straight through to the United States sitting in Afghanistan and the poppy fields, the Geraldo Rivera interviewing that Marine, Major Christmas, back on Fox News, way back when the United States was working with the Taliban, and of course the poppy fields were growing, and their share of the world heroin trade grew to like 97% while the U.S. occupied Afghanistan. It's the same template that the Brits were doing with the Chinese as they had the British East India Company and the legacy of the British colonial system dominating all of those colonial systems, whether it's the French colonial system or it's another colonial system, but the British were the biggest, and they were involved with the opium trade coming out of China. It is absolutely fascinating, and it's really cool because he ties it in with what this man has to do in order to survive. He has to take something that is a painkiller, but he keeps himself ambulating, and his daughter is always there at his side. It's just an amazing character. Now, let me give you a bit of the opening here. I don't have the original book with me, but I have a couple of the sequels. I want to show you these. So here is the real Thomas De Quincey on Murder Considered as One of the Fine Arts. Something more goes to the composition of a fine murder than two blockheads to kill and be killed, a knife, a purse, and a dark lane. Design, grouping, light and shade, poetry and sentiment are indispensable to the ideal murder. Like Aeschylus and Milton in poetry, like Michelangelo in painting, a great murderer carries his art to a colossal sublimity. Now, that is what gets the people in London who are the police officers to say, this murder is similar to stuff that this guy De Quincey, maybe we ought to get this guy De Quincey in because he wrote some really disturbing stuff. I mean, he sounds kind of weird. Well, just to dispel your notions, just to let you know, he's not weird. He's just putting himself in the mind of some of these people. And it's an absolutely fascinating story. So here's the opening. London, 1854. Titian, Rubens, and Van Dyck, it is said, always practiced their art in full dress. Prior to immortalizing their visions on canvas, they bathed, symbolically cleansing their minds of any distractions. They put on their finest clothes, their best wigs, and in one case, even a diamond-hilted sword. The artist of death had similarly prepared himself. Dressed in evening clothes, he sat for 2 hours staring at a wall, focusing his sensations. When darkness cast shadows through a curtained window, he lit an oil lamp and put the equivalent of brushes, paint, and canvas into a black leather bag. Mindful of Rubens, he included a wig, which was yellow in contrast with the light brown of his own hair. A matching actor's beard was added to the bag. 10 years earlier, a beard would have drawn attention, but a recent trend made beards almost to be expected, as opposed to his increasingly unusual clean-shaven features. He set a heavy ship carpenter's mallet among the other items in the bag. The mallet was aged, and the initials J.P. were stamped into its head. In place of the diamond-hilted sword that one artist had worn as he painted, the artist placed a folded ivory-handled razor in his pocket. He stepped from his refuge and walked several blocks until he reached a busy intersection where he waited at a cab stand. After 2 minutes, an empty hansom finally came along, its driver seated prominently behind the sleek vehicle. The artist of death didn't mind standing in plain view, despite the cold December night. In fact, at this point, he wanted to be seen, although anyone observing him would soon find it difficult as fog drifted in from the Thames, casting a halo around gas lamps. The artist paid 8 pence for the driver to take him to the Adelphi Theatre in the Strand. Amid the bustle of carriages and the clop of hooves, he made his way toward a well-dressed crowd waiting to go inside. The Adelphi's gaslit marquee indicated that the sensational melodrama The Corsican Brothers was being performed. The artist of death was familiar with the play and could answer any questions about it, especially its unusual device of 2 first acts, which occurred in sequence but were meant to be imagined as taking place simultaneously. In the first part, a brother saw the ghost of his twin. The next part dramatized how the twin was killed at the same time the brother saw his ghost. The revenge in the final part was so violent, with such copious amounts of stage blood, that many members of the audience claimed to be shocked, their outrage promoting ticket sales. The artist of death joined the excited crowd as they entered the theater. His pocket watch showed him that the time was 7:30. The curtain was scheduled to rise in 10 minutes. In the confusion of the lobby, he passed a vendor selling sheet music for the ghost melody featured in the play. He exited through a side door, walked along a fog-shrouded alley, concealed himself behind shadowy boxes, and waited to determine if anyone followed him. Feeling safe after 10 minutes, he left the far end of the alley, walked 2 blocks, and hired another cab, no longer needing to wait inasmuch as numerous empty cabs were now departing from the theater. This time, he went to a less fashionable part of the city. He closed his eyes and listened to the cab's wheels shift from the large, smooth granite pavers on the main streets to the small, rough cobblestones on the older lanes in London's East End. When he descended into an area where evening clothes were hardly common, the driver no doubt believed that the artist intended to solicit a streetwalker. Behind the closed door of a public privy, he took ordinary clothes from the leather bag, put them on, and folded his theater garments into the bag. As he continued along increasingly shabby streets, he found stoops, nooks, and alleys in which he dirtied the common clothes he now wore and smeared his leather bag with mud. He entered a filthy mews clean-shaven with light brown hair, and left it wearing the yellow beard and wig. His collapsible top hat had long since been put in the bag, replaced by a weathered sailor's cap. The ship carpenter's mallet was now in a pocket of a tattered sailor's coat. In this way, the artist occupied 2 hours. Far from being tedious, the attention to detail was pleasurable, as was the opportunity to reflect upon the great composition ahead. Through the concealing fog, he came within sight of his destination, a mediocre shop that sold clothing to merchant sailors who frequented this area near the London docks. He paused on a corner and glanced at his pocket watch, taking care that no one saw it. A watch was so unusual in this impoverished area that anyone who glimpsed it would suspect that the artist wasn't the sailor he pretended to be. The hands on the watch showed almost 10. Everything was on schedule. His previous visits had revealed that the area's policemen passed along this street at 10:15. Punctuality was part of the job, each patrolman navigating his 2-mile route every hour. The time it took for the constable to reach this point seldom varied. The only person in view was a prostitute, whom the chill night had not encouraged to go back to whatever cranny she called home. When she started to approach, the artist gave her a sharp look that made her stop abruptly and disappear in the fog in the opposite direction. He returned his attention to the shop, noting that its window had a film of dust that dimmed the glow of a lamp inside. A man's shadow stepped out and swung a shutter into place, closing as usual at 10. The moment the shadow went back inside, the artist crossed the empty street and reached for the door. If it was already bolted shut, he would knock, with the expectation that the merchant wouldn't begrudge the further 5 minutes necessary for a final sale. But the door wasn't locked. It creaked as the artist pushed it open and stepped into a shop that was only slightly warmer than the street. A man turned from lowering an overhead lantern. He was perhaps 30, thin, pale, and weary-eyed. He wore a black shirt with a band collar. One of the shirt's buttons didn't match the others. The cuffs of his trousers were frayed. Does a great work of art require a great subject? Does the murder of a queen create a grander impact than that of a common person? No. The goal of the art of murder is pity and terror. No one pities a murdered queen or prime minister or man of wealth. The immediate emotion is one of disbelief that even the powerful are not immune to mortal blows. But shock does not linger, whereas the sorrow of pity does. On the contrary, the subject should be young, hardworking, of low means, with hope and ambition, with sights on far goals despite the discouragement that wearies him. The subject should have a loving wife and devoted children dependent on his never-ending exertions. Pity, tears, those were the requirements for the fine art. Just about to lock up? Lucky I caught you, the artist said as he closed the door. The missus is getting dinner ready, but there's always time for one more. How can I help? The lean shopkeeper gave no indication that the artist's beard didn't appear genuine, or that he recognized the man who, in another disguise, had visited the shop a week earlier. I need 4 pairs of socks. The artist glanced behind the counter and pointed. Thick, like the kind you have on that shelf up there. 4 pairs. The shopkeeper's tone suggested that today they would be a sizable purchase. $1 shilling each. Too much. I hope to get a better price buying so many. Perhaps I should go somewhere else. Behind a closed door, a child cried in a back room. Sounds like somebody's hungry, the artist remarked. Laura, when isn't she hungry? The shopkeeper sighed. I'll add an extra pair. 5 for 4 shillings. Done, said when the shopkeeper walked toward the counter. The artist reached back and secured the bolt on the door. He coughed loudly to conceal the noise, aided by the hollow rumble of the shopkeeper's footsteps. Following, he removed the mallet from his coat pocket. And I'll stop there, because you can hear there's someone else in the back of the place. And that, again, is from the first of the Thomas and Emily De Quincey mysteries, Murder as a Fine Art. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned, I have 2 copies of that. And then I want to show you the others in the series. If you go to Fantastic Fiction, you'll see not just Murder as a Fine Art, but you'll see Inspector for the Dead, which is this one. And that's his daughter there in the image. So there's that, Inspector for the Dead, David Morrell. Good stuff. Okay. And then I also want to show you, I don't have, for some reason, I don't have the Opium Eater, which is a slightly different one, but I have the third one. Opium Eater is like 1.5. It's like a novella. Then there's this, Ruler of the Night, which is the third of the series from 2016. It's amazing to think it was 9 years ago that this was released. Great stuff. Great stuff. Ruler of the Night. These are really, really fun books. And like I said, if you notice what he described about the police officers and their roots and stuff like that, that's all true. Like, he did all that research. It's amazing. And again, if you go inside the books, you'll see that there's some great stuff. There are maps, lots of really interesting history. And on that first one, Murder is a Fine Art, you're going to learn a lot about the way the British Empire operated and the opium trade. Very interesting stuff. So that's all I'll say. If you get a chance, check out those books, the Thomas De Quincey mysteries from David Morrell, who created Rambo, and he's got so many other ones that you can check out. Lots and lots and lots of great books. And so many things have been turned into movies. This one, The Shimmer, is really pretty much a straight up horror story. And then you see collections of his books and all sorts of things, collections of his short stories, I should say. Black Evening has a lot of his short stories. I think The Dripping is in that one. And then you have novellas, really, really good stuff. So check them out. I think you'll like David Morrell's stuff. He's really quite a talented guy. And when he applies himself to history, it's just, you're just there. It's a wonderful thing to be able to be transported like that, especially with a character who sometimes it's a little bit tricky sometimes, because if you have a real person and an author, a contemporary author, folds that real person into a novel, sometimes it almost seems unfair, like they're taking advantage of the dead or whatever. But David Morrell does this in a really respectable way. It's sort of like Michael and Jeff Shara with their war-based ones from, the Civil War on. It was like Killer Angels was a little difficult for me to read, because I thought, well, did they really have these conversations? These guys in the North and the South and Civil War, are they being fair to their characters or whatever? But in this, you can tell he did so much research on this guy, and it's sort of an imagined blip of what this man who was so brilliant might have done if you were working with Scotland Yard, that sort of thing, or pre-Scotland Yard, really. It's a great, great series. It's just a trilogy. You'll rip right through them. Like, you'll read them in a day or 2 days. Really, really good reading. And David Morrell, I haven't seen David Morrell for a number of years, because I haven't gone to a lot of the writers' conventions for a long time. But he has really done a wonderful job with his career and spanned so many subjects that, whatever his interest is, he just goes for it. And his research is wonderful. You'll really enjoy it, I think. So check him out. If you get a chance, don't forget the first one is Murder as a Fine Art. And I think you'll be transported to 1851, 54 London. And you'll remember the 1811 murders. And they were pretty grisly. And I didn't know they were real until I was reading this. I said, is this for real? And I went and looked it up. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's for real. And they were pretty nasty murders. Way before Jack the Ripper. Way before Jack the Ripper. And they were the most grisly murders up to that point. And they held until Jack started doing his thing out in Whitechapel. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. I hope tonight was a good one. It was quite an interesting one with the tech. And there's a lot more to discuss. We'll have a freewheeling time tomorrow, and make sure that the CPU is not burning up. I'm burning for you. This is a sort of hacking up Blue Oyster Cult. And and don't forget, if you do want to check out some of the fiction material, go to the Former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel on YouTube and on Rumble. And you'll see the short stories that we've been reading on Fridays. You'll see the Wordsmith Wednesday suggestions. A lot of really good ones in there. I mentioned already F. Paul Wilson. That was a number of weeks ago. Paul's stuff is great. And I think you'll really like the writers that we get to feature here. And if you've got suggestions, let's open it up sometime. We'll just, have an opportunity to open the lines up. I'll put the link in. If you want to get the camera going or just have your microphone, you can talk about a book that you really liked, maybe something formative as a kid, or your favorite piece of historical literature or science fiction. Do you think that Dune is the best, or Asimov or Heinlein, or, whatever, that sort of thing. Fantasy. What do you think about Terry Brooks versus Tolkien, and, that sort of stuff? What about grimdark and all those things. Do you think George R.R. Martin will ever finish his Song of Ice and Fire? Did you read Wheel of Time? Have you gotten to read E.R. Edison's work? That sort of stuff. Sterling E. Lanier's Unforsaken Hyro, which is sort of a dystopian fantasy thing based out of southern Canada. Really interesting stuff. I want to talk to you about a guy named Jack White, Whyte, whom I discovered when I was at the Outer Limits. They had the little Burnaby Mall, just a little walk away from where I was living. So I would go over there, and they had a bookstore there. And this guy, Jack White, I picked up this book called The Sky Stone. And I just picked it up. I'm like, wow, this is really good. I remember I just kept reading it in the shop. I was like, this is good, man. And I didn't know, I thought it was just a fantasy story. And turns out that it's a lot more than a fantasy story. We'll talk about Jack White sometime, Whyte. And you can check it if you want to go to Fantastic Fiction. You'll see the whole series, the Skystone series. And I won't say anything about it now, but it will tie in if you're a fan of British history and British mythology and the end of the Roman era and the withdrawal of the centurions. I think you'll find this pretty interesting stuff. And it's historical, but there's some fantasy elements mixed in and tied into probably the greatest of British mythological figures of all time. So that's all I'll say. So we'll talk about Jack White sometime. He passed away. I would love to have interviewed Jack White, but he really was quite a talent. So I'll leave you with that. And everyone, thanks again for being here. I hope that the tech was going okay for us. And tomorrow night we're going to slam a couple more really good stories. And I think that tomorrow, we got Brian. He has a comment here. He says, wasn't the Brotherhood of the Rose a real thing? I think they talked about it in 1916 documentary about the history of abortion. He says, I think they were a resident group in Nazi Germany, if I remember correctly. He says, never mind. I was thinking of the White Rose. Well, we'll have to talk about Brotherhood of the Rose again later. Very good. That's a great trilogy. And I should bring up Len Deighton, because Len Deighton does a lot of really good stuff, or did a lot of really good stuff. Nazi stuff, World War II spy stuff, and Soviet spy stuff. Like I said, his series Game, Set, and Match is excellent. And then he did Hook, Line, and Sinker. And the character of Bernard Sampson is in those books. And I might have mentioned this to you. When he went to write Sinker, he had written he had gotten the book done. It had been edited. The publisher was ready to go on it. And the Berlin Wall fell. And he said, can you hold on and not publish that book? And they said, what? He said, I'd like to write a completely different book. And he got it done, and he did it right. He did a really good job on Sinker. So you got to check it out. It's amazing. And if only George R.R. Martin could deal with what was done to his series from the TV series, because I think he's got a block, because I think for Song of Ice and Fire, they did end it plot-wise the way that he had intended to end his novel series, but they got way ahead of him, and then they messed everything up by rushing things and making things very silly. They needed to draw it out much longer to let some of the psychology play in, the twists and turns for some of these characters. All of a sudden, they're just completely different and going crazy and doing nutsy stuff. They needed a lot more time, and they needed to make it work right and make it believable, which he would have done in the novel, George R.R. Martin, in a series of novels. But they got way ahead of him, and I think they ended the TV series the way that he intended to end the book series. And I think he's trying to figure out a way to get out of the hole that they dug for him by screwing everything up with the plot that he had come up with, but not the fashioned and polished way that he had intended it to be done. So I don't know if he's going to end it the same way, if he's going to come up with a new way to end it or not. But it must be very frustrating to think you had all those plans, things were going great, and then they fouled it up, and now they put up a dead end for you. I mean, where do you go, right? Well, Len Deighton, he was able to use the Berlin Wall, and he literally wrote a completely different book for the end of his second trilogy with Bernard Sampson. Great Great stuff. And if you're not familiar with the character Bernard Sampson, check out Game, Set, and Match. They did a mystery series of Game, Set, and Match that Ian Holm was the star. He played Bernard Sampson. And those were great. In fact, that's what got me interested in reading the books. And the books are just super awesome. Like, he knew Berlin very, very well, just incredibly well. Same way that David Morrell will show you Victorian London. Like, again, it's amazing what David Morrell soaked up about that era. Literally, it's just incredible. It's like you're reading something written by somebody who lived there at the time. And he did live in London for quite a while as he did his research. Just great, great stuff. Hats off to David Morrell. And hats off to you. I will head out and get some food, get some chow. And hopefully that whetted your appetite for the opening of Murder as a Fine Art, because you will enjoy it. It's really cool. And you'll enjoy the whole series. And I'll leave you with the Outer Limits control voice saying goodnight. We will now turn control of your television set back to you, as they often say. And by the way, people have asked, oh, where can I see episodes that you worked on? You're not going to see my name on any of the credits for the season when I was at the Outer Limits. I wasn't in a position to have my name on the credits. So there you go. But that's okay. It was fun to work there. That was cool. I'll leave you with this. Have a great night. God bless.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the Outer Limits.